now we go west or south better to TU München still and Eichstätt-Ingolstadt. Pitch number 2, please. Who is who? You're in Munich? Ingolstadt. Okay, so you're in Munich.
Hello, everyone.
Slides.
Do you need slides?
Yes, we have the slides here.
Let's see if it works. We need a second.
That's the slides is in the desktop here.
Okay. Which one? This one?
Okay, hello everyone. This is Jose, my colleague Alexander. We are here to present some solutions and some insights from what is digital sovereignty and about some solutions we are proposing. Okay, so first of all, I would like you can see the first picture, the current situation, what is going on here. As you can see here, there is the map of the geographical distribution of the main platforms in the world. And you can see, like, American is the #1, getting a lot of stuff, a lot of things going there, right? You can see many servers like Facebook, Netflix, etc. Right? As you can see on the right hand, oh well, my left hand, is like China, Asia, Korea, Taiwan. They are getting a lot of stuff here, growing very fast, and almost getting the size of America, right? Particularly, I have experience living in Taiwan around 10 years, doing my master there. So I can explain a little bit much better why they are getting there. Like in the past, they were really small villages, like small cities like Shenzhen. Like in 10 years, become a very huge city and getting a lot of technology, metros, airports, etc. Right? So you can see how come they are growing so fast, because most of the servers and main platforms are growing up in Asia. And you can see, for example, in Europe, still a very little concentration of platforms. Like, for example, we have a very famous one, SAP, and also Spotify, but we have others, but they're still not in the picture, but very, very small. And even in Africa, there are Napsters, we are very famous. I don't know if you know it. Still, why they have this situation now? I think everybody knows about this, no? So most of the data getting into Europe is not from Europe, and we have a lot of susceptibility about this. I think everybody do their homework and do the research about this, and that's why we're trying to sum up this about the current situation. Even now, like I mentioned it before, like even the hardware part, like you can see in the iPhones, if you open the iPhone and see the chip A14 Bionic, right? You can see the little words inside. It said made in Taiwan, made in TSMC, one of the famous companies for the semiconductor. And now, for example, because the commercial war between China and United States, now they are moving their factory to Arizona in the States and to make also chips made in the States. Okay. So let's see about the solution we are proposing here, creating a regulatory framework for the gatekeepers. Basically, taking in consideration what we explained about the solution about how the data will arrive in different gates or different kind of data, like for example, sharing data, no, among others, like web services, transactions, consultation, etc. They will get in 2 ways of platform, like for example, the centralized way, which is more for individuals like you and me, like getting the data through a conduct of codes, like for example, behavior. Like they said for the previous group, like what about the haters sending emails or something like that? There will be a code of conduct about this data, and then also the transaction for people who will do the consultation, and they will get a new item or the new data retrieval. So this is for the centralized one, and then is the decentralized one, which is for more from companies, like going also through the same code of conduct and getting through the transaction. So basically, just to give you an example, what if someone in Europe posts fake news on the web and spread out? Can you detect it, or can you find a source or do something? Any restriction about this? I think there is no anyone. Right? I didn't see anything about this. I never found it. I don't know. You can let me know later. But if you see in China, if you put something against the government, maybe the next day they will find you. Some police will knock the door and say, "Okay, go with me to the police station." It will be something like this. But it doesn't mean for me, like I want to put like for European Union to create a censorship about this. I don't want it. I mean, this is not my meaning. My meaning is more about regulation, about the kind of data, we can get completely protection from attacks, haters from other countries. Like for example, Russia hackers. I don't know. Having can protect, and we can say like kind of gate selections, like data sharing, web services, transaction and consultations. We can imagine this, like for example, an ATM from a bank need to have a monitoring system that can shoot alert or troubleshooting. For example, if this run out of the paper for the ticket or run out of the bills for the cash. So there will be kind of a pro-view system that can monitor this kind of information, this data. Actually, this kind of solution is very possible and feasible. That's why we are getting about the gatekeepers data regulation system, about the data arrival here in the European Union. We strongly believe, like in Europe, there is the solid foundation for the freedom and speech and everything, but we need to also get regulation about this. And then?
Thank you, Jose. Also looking forward to your questions. Now coming to the EU data regulatory framework. If we speak concrete about our solutions, we can divide it into 3 areas: the scientific, the political, and the economic area. Starting with the economic background, on the consumer side, we have many areas also known from a digital marketing. We need a new consumer regime for the digital markets, in particularly data sovereignty clauses. Also already mentioned was the GDPR that came into effect on 25th of May 2018. That's already a good start to harmonize the regulations in the EU and to not rely only on nationwide laws. What we also need is a fair competition abroad. Those companies that provide those services also enable the data transparency mechanisms of those firms in 3 areas. The personal data that has, of course, many issues also with trust and privacy. So I think it's the most pity one. Non-personal data might be a bit easier, and government data. Then you can also see on the lower side the 4 areas we kind of focused on. So the cross-sectorial industry cooperation. What we mean by that is that we have an industry-wide cooperation system with its barriers, with its gatekeepers also, but which enables the cooperation across those industry. But it should foster competition and not negate it. The evidence-based policymaking, it can be compared to the German Lieferkettengesetz or supply chain law, that you always know your source of origin and also the following parts afterwards. So we know where does new information come from and where does it originate. Mutual learning policies is the same as I mentioned for the companies, but on the academic side, that we are not working in the academia in like the Elfenbein Tower, but have the ability to better work together. So I will also, on a later point, come to a platform that is already been working or is already worked on right now, that always or tries to ensure this mutual learning policy. But that's also one of our points. And the last one is the structured dialogue. Of course, we need a certain harmony in this process. And the structured dialogue in particular means that we all have the same set of rules in this regulatory framework. The project I tried to mention is Gaia X, some of you might know. So it's a very high-performance platform that enables exactly those points and helps us achieve the balance with the companies overseas, the GAFAM, and bring some of the provided services back to Europe. Thank you.
So perhaps a first question from my side. If we look into that in the next 4 years, we'll have 4 times more data than today produced globally. And now you want to manage all this data and put gatekeepers everywhere. Do you think it's something that is feasible, or how do you go about that?
Talking of feasibility, so especially mentioning the 4 years time slot. So there's a statistic that we have, I think, 124 trillion bytes of data. I don't know what this number is. I don't think any one of us knows this number and how many zeros come afterwards. But to manage this data can be quite difficult, and I think it's decided not on a political side but on the economic side. So there has to be the regulatory framework to enable the economic or the businesses to create a market for this data and to ensure that it's going in the right direction, especially with transformative technologies as AI, IoT. All of those new things can come with a downside. And the regulators only have the job to try to bring them in a good way.
Coming back to the question, the problem right now is that companies have a lot of data, but most of the data is useless. So until they identify which data there is, you would put regulation even before that process. So it would mean it would make us completely or very difficult to actually do anything, I guess.
Well, I can say like it depends on kind of data. Maybe some of they are not useful for companies, but it could be a good way to get like the tracking for the data from the origins. Like for example, what if every personal people can have the ID? We have ID, right? But what if in the ID we can have our cloud for our own data? This can think for each individual and maybe for companies can be our asset. I mean, the data can be really the asset, no matter if useful for not companies or not, but this can be, belongs to you, and you belongs to getting more power with the asset maybe in the future for negotiation or to application for some areas.
You gave some quite specific recommendations. Thank you for that. It's really interesting. That for implementation, what are the biggest roadblocks?
What do you mean for implementation?
Like now to implement that, to get the digital gatekeepers on board. So in the next 4 years, we heard, okay, so...
Yeah, I just put the example, as just mentioned it, about the ATM, right? Just again, the analogy. Yeah. We have the ATM. The ATM sometimes is running out of paper or bills in the cash. Mm-hmm. So there will be a control monitor system like ProView that checking all these logs or these incidents. Mm-hmm. Right, so it should be something like this. A gatekeeper could be kind of this ProView system can get into the net or the data through European servers, and they can catch and see, for example, if there is a hater, can try to avoid this kind of messages or kind of protect the environment from those haters. This is just an example of application.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I really liked your overview of the European data regulatory framework. And I think if someone from the European Commission would have a look at it and say, exactly, that's what we're doing. Have you compared your vision to the regulations that are in place and are proposed? And what are the shortcomings?
Maybe I go to this question. So one example in particular, I have 2 examples in particular to respond to this question. So the first thing is the GDPR. That is going in the right direction. I think it was the right thing to do to harmonize national law, bring it all together, and have a fundamental basis that we all agreed on. In the or after 2018, when some of the penalties have already been administered, I thought it was kind of a bureaucratic monster. So it was more bureaucracies for especially small and medium enterprises, and didn't made digitization that sexy as it should be, especially for European companies. So that's one shortcoming of the GDPR. There are, of course, certain areas in the GDPR that try to be institutionalized, and if we go on and maybe also amend it, as the previous team mentioned, it might be very, very good in the near future, or even better. The second thing is that we have a lot of policymakers also at the European Commission from overseas. So lobbyists from Facebook, from Google, from Apple, that all can influence the process of going into these laws, and maybe also influence it in a direction that is not going into the best for the consumer, or maybe also the businesses in the end. So maybe making it more transparent which lobbyist actions take effect in the regulation might also help in getting the process more efficient.
Okay, thank you.
What incentives do you see that in Europe, for example, more platforms, independent platforms would be developed? How could we incentivize building up platforms?
Okay, maybe I can say that we need really specific digital sovereignty clauses for the European Union. Sometimes people feel not incentive, for example, open a business here in Germany, like for example, thinking the whole bureaucratic process to open a company, and even it's harder to close the company because you need, I don't know, many years in advance to report the close of the company. Sometimes this kind of regulation for each of the countries, they have kind of limitation and no incentive. But if you want to make all the European Union countries have the same clauses, the same way they can do it, maybe it will take forever, right? But what if we can create a digital sovereignty clauses, like all regulations and company openings should be like in only one way, and the people can just get it in any country they want.
But isn't it? I don't know, but when we look on the American market, on the Asian market, we have less regulations, I would say, than we have in Europe.
Definitely.
And we see that today we have more platforms there.
Yeah.
Digitalization is going on. So
you're already giving us a hint on what might be the right way. Of course, reducing bureaucratic barriers might be, or reducing entry barriers in general for those initiatives might be a good starting point. Another thing I can also think of is fostering companies or young companies, especially through incubators, to tackle those challenges and to develop those platforms. So give seed funding, give also advice from bigger companies, from seniors to those who create the new young platforms, and reducing the bureaucratic barriers in the long term, like 10 years in the start of the company.
okay.
Yeah, I can add something also about this. Like for European Union, it's really good also the competitiveness, and maybe this is also another incentive when people can come here really are playing with the big fishes. I mean, trying the best and getting some capital seeds. Like for example, in my case, for example, I trying to do also a startup here, and I apply for a EIT Food. Maybe you know the European technology for food, EIT Food. They give me 10k euros for my capital seed for my project, but still I need to deal with some stages, right? So this is kind of incentive for people to open a business here, or to get in kind of protection from the legislative way, or something like that can get it more closer to the experts here. Of course, in America, they have the Silicon Valley, they have things, but now, for example, you can see still there is not much people with the know-how how to do it. For example, TSMC is open the fab for the microchips and semiconductors in Arizona, but they cannot find people can work in IC designs from 5 millimeters, and even lower, they're getting 4 or 3 millimeters. So they need to bring people from Taiwan to America. But in Europe, maybe you don't need to bring people, because I think here people are really, really high. You have amazing universities like TUM, between others. And you have capable people here to build really a strong community, even much better than America.
Okay, thank you. And I would have just a really technical question on your landscape, which you had there with the different platforms. What was the scale? What is the scale?
The scale is the number
is
of
market cap or no?
Say again?
Is it market cap or what is the scale?
The scale is the number of platforms in each servers and platforms in the country.
Okay.
Yeah, servers.
Okay, thank you.
For example, here in Germany, it's very famous the SAT, right? And actually, there should be another one which is Tesla, open near Berlin, right? They are building also a new server there for their own data protection. They are really cool. I mean, this guy, Elon Musk. Yeah.
Can agree on that.
Yeah.
Maybe a question from my side. I see that regulation is a big problem, or there are hurdles indeed. Now the European Commission tries to set up an idea through regulation in the space you're talking about, because they, in the Data Governance Act, they try to establish information intermediaries. So as kind of platforms who would host data without being allowed to use them in order to increase data sharing, which might also speak to incentives or problems in kind of collecting data. I wonder what you think about this idea of having this specific business model of information intermediaries that collect data and without being able to use it themselves, and where you see additional problems of sharing data. That's something you didn't speak about so far, because often, I mean, with platforms, the beauty is that kind of people give their data anyway, or by using the platform, kind of they insert it into the ecosystem. But in many cases, as you said, companies sit on data. They maybe don't know about the value, or maybe they don't want to give it away. So, what do you see as challenges and opportunities there?
Maybe I start before you go with your points. So I see two key benefits coming along with the data intermediaries through the Data Governance Act. One is that you, of course, reduce the asymmetric information from because if the user shares some personal data or data or any company shares data, they don't know where it goes. And if you have the data intermediary, you don't need to worry about where your data goes, because you always know that the data intermediary is responsible for the forgiving of the data. So you reduce the asymmetric information between the first point and the last node, kind of. And the second thing is that you also reduce the risk of moral hazard, that, for example, companies sitting on data misuse their information, either be sharing it with third parties that were not intended to be they were not intended to be the data shared with, on the one side, but also as the data intermediary has control over it, it might be also be penalized if it's misused.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose. Thank you, Alexander.